Welcome to our first class on the Parsha with Nechama Leibowitz. And we'll start with a brief introduction about the teacher herself, and then delve into Parshat Noach as well. Yes, and I apologize. If you did not get an email, I can connect you to Karen, who can add you to the list. And I will try to always send out a source sheet on Tuesday morning, but it is not at all necessary to pre-prepare or even print or save. And also, I can put a link in the chat too. So she was born in 1905 in Russia and lived until the age of 93 when she died in 1997 in Israel. She made Aliyah after getting her doctorate in Germany. Hello, Rabbi Silver and Rabbi Winter. Looking at my notes as I talk to you. And she is the sister of Yeshayahu Leibowitz, who is perhaps the more famous, although that's hard to say, and married to her own uncle, Yedida Lippman Leibowitz. So she is someone who lectured in Tel Aviv University, Hebrew University. She had a radio show, or was a guest on a radio show called The Voice of Israel throughout her life. She won the Israel Prize in the field of education in 1956. Definitely a giant in the field of Torah study. She was not a feminist, which I will admit was a little disappointing to me. And many famous Jewish feminists tried to convince her, but she really just wanted to learn Torah, and she was a woman. And so she made great strides, I think, for women in women's learning, but not dafka for that reason. She was extraordinarily humble. I struggled a lot with what I should call her, what I should refer to her as throughout the shiurim, like Nechama says, or Nechama Leibowitz, right? She doesn't have a title. She insisted on only be calling Mora instead of like a professor. And she often hosted people in her own apartment in Jerusalem to teach them. And she famously said, I'm not a museum. Like everyone should come and interact with me, right? She wanted to be a part of the people. So I want to show her great respect and might also refer to her as Nechama at times. And she maintained her excitement for teaching throughout the many, many decades she taught, which I think is inspiring. Okay. So I want to talk about two sort of meta things about what we're going to study, and then maybe a few things about her goals for study, which we'll hope to embody in our class as well. I would say that most of her work is structured around Tergilio notes, which are Parsha sheets that she made between 1942 and 1971. So she made them for a solid 4 decades. And it is estimated that she sent them to 40,000 people over those decades, which means that she basically had like an open education university that she did not charge for. She started them when she had a group of 16 girls who learned with her for 6 months, and then they were going back to kibbutz. And they said, Mara Nechama, how will we learn when we go back home, when we have to start, working on the farm again and in the children's house? And so Nechama said, I'll send you every week, I'll send you a Parsha sheet for study. And if you want to be like, if you want my feedback on your notes, send it to me with a self-addressed envelope with a postage stamp. And that's all she requested. And those 16 girls had a lot of friends and a lot of cousins and a lot of aunts and uncles. And so people started sending them to her from all over the country. And she said that sometimes people would send them to her for months. And she would finally write back every single one. She responded by hand, written notes on their sheets, like, oh, who are you? Where do you come from? She said one day, like a contractor showed up at her door and said, I need to know the answer before Shabbat. Can you just read my sheet now? And each sheet had questions on it. It was really extraordinary. I want to show you one of the original ones. And one of the things that is so remarkable about this, I think, is that she exposed people. So like this is a typed up, right, on like a typewriter. This is Parshat Vayera from the year Tafshin Reish or Tafshin Chav, I don't know. And she lists out the sources, and she writes, right, here's the Ramban, here's the Divrei David, Rav Wolf, Heidenheim. Um, Very hard to read these, especially when we're not accustomed to this kind of typeset anymore. And then at the bottom, there were questions. So you can see down here, Dalet is she'elot. So these are the questions that if you wrote the answer, she would write back. One X meant that it was a little bit hard, and two X's meant it was very hard. And there was one extraordinary story about someone I know. It was printed, so I think it's okay to share. A Rabbi Billet, whose daughter, Shira Billet, is married to Rav Stephen Exler, who's the head of the Hebrew Institute of Riverdale. He, for years, learned at the Gris Kollel for YU in Israel. And someone said, you should learn with Nechama Leibowitz. And he thought, oh, a woman, what will she be able to teach me? It's not going to be so hard. And finally, he went to her house, to her apartment, and he sat down and she said, okay, do my worksheet, do my Gillion, and then we'll talk. And he started, and the first question was easy. And then the next one had an X, and it was like a little bit hard. And by the third question with the two X's, he said he was totally lost. And he learned with her for, a year and a half before he ended up going back to America. Now he's the head of a very big shul in Woodmere, New York. Rav Chaim Soloveitchik, the son of Rav Soloveitchik, learned with her for a year in Chavruta. So she had very famous Chavrutas, and then she had contractors and someone who wrote to her while he was manning like a tank in World War II, right? Because this spans from 42 to 71. So she was truly a person who reached the Amcha, the wide, vast array from the like super privileged, ivory tower all the way to random kibbutz in the middle of Israel. Um, and in terms of her approach, and so she was able, right, pre-Safaria, it's like almost hard to imagine now, but if you didn't have a chumash, or you only had a chumash that had, the Rashi and the Ramban and the Ibn Ezra, you didn't know about, Hasidic commentaries and modern commentaries. Kasuto, she often is quoted in our sheets. And so people just didn't have access to these commentaries, and she really brought them to the world. But she said for herself that she had no derech. She wrote, I'm reading from a quote, I only teach what the commentaries say, nothing is my own. So that's a wild way to be a teacher, and definitely panicked me because I thought I was going to find like essays that she wrote, but really she tries to let the text speak for herself. And students that I have heard, and I know Rabbi Winter is a student of hers, that she really made the commentaries feel alive. Like you could hear their voices, you could understand their motivations. And it was really an exciting thing to be in her class. So I just want to share, let's see, maybe one or two principles that I learned about her goals. So her goal, and she wrote this much more beautifully in Hebrew, was that she wanted to warm students' heart with Torah. She wanted to create Ahavat Torah by using the light of Torah. So really a woman who is deeply inspired on her own and wanted to inspire others. But for her, she was known for saying basically no pain, no gain, right? You couldn't come to class and daydream. Everyone was engaged through the whole class. It was someone called it an intellectual roller coaster. There was no lecture, no like frontal shear. Everyone had to participate. So maybe we'll try that a little bit. We'll have some readers. She said a boring class might leave a student, chas v'shalom, with the mistaken understanding that Tanakh itself is boring. She felt like she represented Tanakh every time she walked into the room. It's really an amazing feat. And also that we have to be exacting, that we shouldn't say, oh, that was a beautiful parsha, or what a beautiful, she said, she likened it to like an orchestra, what a beautiful piece of music. But we have to be able to say, I heard this note and I heard this instrument section playing with that instrument section, right? That it has to be fine-tuned listening in that way. So I just want to finish this introduction piece by saying that I saw lots of things. Nechama famously had no children. And at some point, she was quoted as saying she would give up all of her Torah just to have children. And at other times, she was known to say that her students were her children, right? She had thousands of students. And that her Torah words, she did write some essays, and that was like her children as well. And at her funeral, her nephew stood up and said, Nechama had no children, but if you were a student of hers, I invite you to say Kaddish with me. And that there were thousands of voices that joined in at the funeral. So I hope that through learning some of her Gilyonim, this at least for Sefer Breshit, that we can try to become, if not her children, a part of her family. And you know, I think saying the Kaddish on her behalf is such a powerful thing, right? To learn her Torah is perhaps a similar effort of sorts. So that's my hope. My hope is that we'll learn some of these parshanim. We'll really be challenged by them. Many of the parsha sheets, like the one that I showed you, have been converted into a Sefaria-like format where all of her sources are on the page and her questions are at the bottom. I was not sure that we were really prepared for that level of in-depth study at this moment. I thought we might need Mora Nechama as a guide for this class. And so I copied a part of this book. Thank God for my mother who bought these for me once a very long time ago. It even has the Israel Bookstore of Brookline, Massachusetts stamp on the back. These are collections of her Parsha sheets, and there are several, like there are 7 for Parshat Noach, and I got to pick one that I thought was the most interesting for us. I'm just looking for the link. Oop, here we go. Well, let's see if this works. Anyone who wants to, oops, I will share my screen also, but anyone who wants to open it on their own screen who doesn't have it, I think that will bring you to it. So here she links together a lot of her sources at the beginning, and then she has her Parsha sheet at the end. And so maybe we'll look at a little bit of that and a little bit of this. And next week, maybe we'll try to be a little bit more bold so we can use a Sefaria source sheet. And I know that it was not a perfect scan. I apologize. My at-home scanner does not really like the shape of this book. It was difficult to get it to lie flat. Let me open it on my screen though, so that we can look at it all together. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I actually sent you the intro. So I did, I don't want to spend too much time on that now. I copied that yesterday when I was copying things because it's an introduction to the book and I thought it was beautiful, but I think we've shared a lot of that, and so we don't need to do it again right now. So let's just do it one more time here. So this should be the words around Noach. Okay, now I'm going to open that one up. Okay, good. Here we are. Oh, let's rotate it around. Okay, so let's start with the story of the rainbow.
See it on my screen. I read it already.
Excellent.
But I don't see it on my right now. I don't
Yes,
see it.
I know. Thank you. Hold on.
Oh.
It's technical difficulties. Hold on. Okay, let's see. Here we go. Okay, here we are. We're going to get much better at this over time until it's like we've always known how to do this on our screen. Okay. So I know that time is short. I actually want to skip the first page here on the left because I think that it is super interesting, and we probably could have like created a whole source sheet just around this idea. Lots of people, including Marina Hama, talk about the comparing and contrasting Abraham and Noah's story. Right, Abraham gets certain, a bracha or brachot. Noach seems to get sort of similar brachot. Abraham is not allowed to eat the animals in Gan Eden. Noach is allowed to eat the animals after the flood. I think it's interesting, but again, I want us to sort of focus our time and attention here. Let's see if we can make this bigger and maybe even, ooh, there we go. Okay. So I want to start with this idea of a blessing, and thinking about the rainbow. Okay, maybe I'll read the first paragraph, warm us up, and then we'll have someone jump in after. The first ancestor of mankind began life with a blessing, right? That's Adam. Similarly, the ancestor of post-Diluvian humanity began the second span of human history with a blessing. That's Noach. But Noach was granted a special gift which was not given to Adam. The Lord made a covenant with him and his sons, just as later on in the course of human history, he made a covenant with Abraham, the progenitor of the chosen seed, with the ancestor of the Jewish people. The first man to deserve the title of a man righteous and wholehearted, right? Ish Tzadik Tamim, in the Bible, that's Noach, also merited receiving a promise in the form of a covenant from the Lord that all flesh shall not be cut off anymore, right? So referring to the psukim where it says that God will not bring another flood down to this world. Man is required to show fear and love of his maker. The Bible and rabbinic writings admonish us to conduct ourselves in this manner, and our liturgy expresses this relationship in various forms. An attitude motivated by fear alone savors of idolatry, which regards the Godhead as a monster desirous of bringing misfortune on man and prosecuting him. An attitude which is completely devoid of fear indicates that man fails to regard himself in the appropriately humble light as dust and ashes, fails to appreciate his entire dependence on his maker and the full burden of responsibility towards him. Right? So far, it seems like what she's saying is that it's not enough to either fear or love, right? We have to have some kind of combination. Fear to her reeks of idolatry, but too much love and not any fear will not cause us to be grateful to God. Oh, I said someone else was going to read, and then I just kept going. Does someone want to read starting at our Sidra? Anyone?
Sure.
Okay.
Our Sidra in the story of the deluge involving the wiping out of all mankind and the making of a covenant with humanity reborn exemplifies the role of the twin attributes of justice and mercy, fear and love. Both aspects are symbolized in the covenant and token of the covenant given to Noah and his descendants.
Beautiful. Thank you, Sherry. So, right. So, what she's arguing here, right, is that this paragraph, which we're about to read, does a nice job of balancing both love and fear. Okay. Someone, Sherry, or someone else who would like to read in Hebrew.
It would take me a while.
Nice to hear you.
Zot ot it'll take me too long.
It's also, the typeface is a bit fuzzy and a little hard to read, to be fair. How about you? Will you read the English if I read the Hebrew?
Sure.
Okay. Zot ot habrit, asher ani noten beini ubenechem. Et kashti natati be'anan, v'haita la'ot brit beini uben haaretz. V'haya ba'anani anan al haaretz, v'gir'ata hakeshet ba'anan, v'zacharti et briti.
This is the token of the covenant which I make between me and you.
Okay.
In other words, we are not.
Wait, sorry, this side of the page now, the I have set.
Where?
The bold at the top here.
Yeah. I'm just going to make it bigger. I have set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be for a token of a covenant between me and the earth. And when I bring clouds over the earth, and the bow is seen in the cloud, I will remember. Oh, rainbow. I will remember my covenant.
Yes, exactly. The rainbow, right? She translates it as a bow, but we probably do translate it as a rainbow in our text. So I will be honest and admit that I do not see a balance between fear and love yet. Right? To her, I think that seems self-evident here. I'm not sure I welcome anyone who might have an idea of what is going on there. But now she goes on to explain what why the rainbow, right? That's a brilliant question. Not that her other point isn't brilliant, but for us, mere mortals, just, not quite on her level, right? Why a rainbow? Right. So does someone want to read? Much perplexity has been caused.
Much perplexity has been caused by the link between the bow and the divine promise never to wipe out mankind by means of a flood. Many have searched in the bow, its color, form, and nature, for something which might signify a token. Ramban offers us some examples of these searchings. This is the token. The symbolism of this token, it has been said, lies in this. The bow does not reside with its base above, appearing as if it were being aimed downward at the earth, sending his arrows and scattering them on earth. It is shaped the opposite way to show that it is um, not aiming anything from heaven at mankind. Similarly, it is the practice of what is that?
Combat.
Combatants to form their bow this other way to show that they are offering peace to their adversary. Further, the bow has no string by which to shoot the arrows. In other words, the stringless upturned bow symbolizes that retribution and anger, often symbolized in the Bible by arrows, as in Psalm 144, verse 6, cast forth lightning and scatter them, send out thine arrows and discomfort them. Or Psalm 77, verse 18, the clouds flooded forth waters, the skies sent out a sound, thine arrows also went abroad, and so forth, are being replaced by an era of love and peace. Ramban
Okay,
himself,
wait, hold on one second. So idea number one, right? So here's the love and peace aspect, right? Is that God is turning the bow around, right? God is showing I might have been viewed as your adversary during the flood, but now I promise the war is over. I'm done fighting. Um, which is very beautiful, I think. But she is quick to discount this, to say that the Ramban is also actually not satisfied with this idea, and that there's actually more important work at play. I am proud to tell you I decided to look up these references, and this is an error. It is not 29, it is 21, should you want to go do the same thing. Um, but we can talk a little bit about the examples. I think it's the Ramban picks interesting examples. He says here, if you ask the real reason for this token, it may be compared to Bereshit 31:52. This heap be witness and pillar be witnesses. Any Torah buffs who know what Perek Lamed Aleph is about?
it's
This is
about Abraham uh, securing his ownership of the wells that his people had dug, right?
You're a little early. That is
Oh,
going to be
okay.
the next example, but that's great that you thought of that one. I'm very impressed. 31 is already Yaakov and Lavan. We'll see later, right? Yaakov runs away from Lavan after establishing all these flocks, and then he takes the flocks that have the spots, right? The whole dream of what belongs to him is included. Yeah, and Lavan runs after, and they have it out between them, and then similarly, right, they come together at the end, and I think that that's a piece of it, perhaps, right, is this idea that like Lavan and Yaakov are in a very bad place. That's not just like a formal partnership, but they come back together. They turn their bows upwards, so to speak. And then Judith referred to the one that is actually in Kaf Aleph, not Kaf Tet. These seven lambs shall, one of the interesting things, side note, that I've noticed while looking at this book is that I'm just so not used to these old translations of the Torah. So these seven lambs you will take out of my hand so that they be witness for me, is how I would translate it. And that is Avimelech and Abraham, as Judith said, securing Beersheba. So another place where there was some miscommunication, discomfort, tension between the two people, and then they come back together. For everything which would appear to have been placed before two persons to remind them of some vow contracted between them is called an oath. And every agreement is called a brit. So what the Ramban is saying is, listen, oath, the fact that it says an oath habrit is showing us that there is actually no real meaning behind the item. It's just a contract. And it shall be a token, just like it says of circumcision of Brit Milah in Breshit Yud Zayin. It will be a token of the covenant between me, God, and you, Abraham, on account of the agreement that they would circumcise all the seed of Abraham to serve him. So it seems like the Ramban is saying, don't read into this bow, right? In other words, we are not to look for and ferret out its symbolism in the form of the bow, its color, or physical characteristics to determine the connection between them and what it represents for us. It is the same as in the case of tzitzit. We are not to look for its meaning in the number of its knots or threads. The text simply says, behold it and remember it. Similarly, the bow will serve as a token or sign because God has fixed it as a token of God's covenant, which in his kindness, he made with mankind that he would never again send a flood to destroy all flesh, not because violence and robbery had disappeared from the world, and not because mankind had already been purified of sin, but on account of his mercy and patience. So I thought that was a really interesting point that I had not been thinking about, right? We're told that the flood comes about because of violence and robbery, right? Hamas and all the terrible things that happen on the world. And it seems like God is not saying, well, now that the Mabul is over, everything is clean and perfect, and I won't do it again because everything will stay that way. But God is saying, I'm not going to be so impatient or lack so much mercy in the future. I don't know. There's something about that that I find disheartening. Like, I would like to think that God had greater hope in us. What was the point of the flood if we were just going to go back to that point? It seems like it was an exercise in God's patience more than an exercise in us learning anything, the way that I feel like it's being framed here. But I welcome other ideas, and I don't mean to be a heretic so early on.
Well, we could learn
Excuse me,
that God,
Rabbanit, but
What was
that's
that?
what it says. That's what it says in Pirkei Avot. From 10 generations, from Adam until Noach, was God's patience.
Hmm. Okay. And then the patience disappears for like 40 days when the world is destroyed and then comes back, you're saying after the flood?
Right.
Mm-hmm. So I guess I wanted to see the flood as like a fix, a solution, as opposed to seeing it as just like a momentary loss of God's control, which is kind of how I see it here.
Well, it may have
Oh,
appeared
sorry.
that way to God when he executed that, when he made the flood, but God seems to have second thoughts about destroying everything. I mean,
Hmm.
we're experiencing all kinds of floods and hurricanes and other destructive natural events right now. And it does give one pause, to ask how we can organize ourselves to make things better.
Hmm.
How much does it take to teach human beings a lesson, I think is what's at issue here. And God decides that destroying the whole world is probably not going to be a good solution.
Hmm. Okay, I like that. Yeah, Sherry, what were you gonna say before I say anything?
I agree with what Judith said. I hadn't thought of it that way. What I was going to say is that we can learn that God has kindness because I think I could see past, present, and future, and He already knows that human beings are a little imperfect, and
Hmm.
sometimes cruel. And so instead of saying, I will do this because of the goodness in you, he's saying,
Hmm.
I will do this because I am kind. And
Hmm.
and you are free to choose how to be, but I will remain kind.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I really like both of those ideas. I think, right, and putting it together with Rabbi Eliakim's idea, right, is that God has always been this kind. Perhaps there was some thought that there would be a lesson learned, but maybe that's not really a lesson that all of mankind can learn at one time. But God will remain to be merciful and kind anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. And certainly that thought is echoed through Nevi'im, right? Mora Nechama brings this idea from Yeshayahu, Ki mei Noach zot li asher nishpati me avor mei Noach, od al haaretz ken nishpati miktsof alaich umigar bach. Just because it's hard to read, especially that text. For this is as the water of Noach unto me, for as I have sworn that the waters of Noach should no more go over the earth, so have I sworn that I would not be wroth with thee. You could look that up in a more modern translation. Right, that we take great comfort in that. No matter how badly we mess up moving forward, God will not do that great thing again that totally wipes everyone out. And she references this piece, which I referenced briefly on Rosh Hashanah, which we read in the Musaf of the Rosh Hashanah Amidah, that when we stand before the judge of the universe and beseech his mercy in judgment, we recall Noach, and the promise given through that covenant, and this text is very small, I'm going to read it in my book. V'gam et Noach ba'ahava zacharta, right? That you remember God, that you remember Noach in love. V'tafkidehu b'dvar Yeshua v'rachamim. And you visited him, Noach, with a promise of salvation and mercy. V'haviyacha et mei hamabul lishchat kol basar mipnei roa ma'aleh alehem. Right, you brought forth the water of the flood to destroy everyone because of their evil deeds. Al kain zacharnu bo lefanayich Hashem Elokeinu. So too, please remember us, God. Laharbot zaro afarot tevel v'tza'ata'av kechol hayam. So his remembrance came before you, God, right? Noach's remembrance to increase his seed like the dust of the earth and his offspring like the sand of the sea, right? Moving sort of into Abraham, as we will next week. And so she concludes on the next page her written thoughts by saying that the bow in the cloud, which accompanies the rain, therefore symbolizes the message of the prophet Habakkuk, one of Trei Asar, Beroges rachem tiskor, in wrath remember compassion. And so I think, and I definitely welcome ideas and thoughts. I think that the balance that we see in the rainbow is not in the rainbow itself, but in the story, right? That we see God's scary side. There is reason to be scared of a God that chooses to wipe everyone on earth out in 40 days. And yet, out of that angry time comes this beautiful rainbow at the end of the story, and that shows the balance of a God that we can love, not just fear. Meaning that the story of Noach is not just a story about the flood or about Noach or about the evil of people, but it's really about God's own theology of God's self. That God sometimes shows these great bursts of rage, which are very scary, but are balanced to also include the turning up of the bow, as it were, which, again, thinking about, I was hoping that we would head into this year without thinking so much about the difficult times that we are in, that they would be less difficult. But thinking about, if we even think about the last year as in many ways, a burst of wrath, hopefully not from God, but seemingly allowed by God, to remember that the compassion sort of comes at the end. I think this is such a beautiful sentence. And to remember that she wrote these in the midst of extraordinarily hard times, right? The tail ends of World War II, the wars for the creation of the state of Israel, the 67 war, right? That these were not simple times. I don't know which year this one was, frustratingly, because it's not dated that way in this book. But it's possible it came in a difficult year. Those are years we look even more powerfully for the rainbow. So I welcome thoughts or ideas. I know it's getting a little bit late. I usually try to make this a 30-minute class. I've drifted over my time. I included here the questions for further study. This Gillion actually can be found online. I could put the link into the text. Where she brings, you can see she brings Kasuto, who does a super interesting thing with how he lines up the psukim, and she brings some extra sources from Abarbanel about the bow in the sky, and some questions from the Radak about the bow in the sky. I'm not sure that we'll have time to go through them tonight, and they sort of end right here on this page. but again, I'll give you an easier version of it. But I would love to hear people's thoughts. If this also, like, they could be meta thoughts. Is this interesting? Can you really not read these scans? Should we do something else entirely? I want to hang in there with Nechama Leibowitz. I think it's going to be great to sort of start to understand her style, to start to unpack these Gilionot. But I'm definitely open to feedback and suggestions.
I have a couple of thoughts. Number one, I thought it was a great experience. I think I really enjoyed our interaction here, and but I still under the impression of of Jonah that we just read in Yom Kippur. I think I saw some parallels here. I'm still reverberating from Jonah, and I said,
Okay.
God threatened to destroy Nineveh, and then was waiting for tshuva of the people of Nineveh. I still don't know if the Ninevians repented or not, but God forgave them. And then Jonah got angry that God forgave them. So there is this condemnation and forgiveness. If now thinking back to Noah at the time of Jonah, if I had thought about this during Yom Kippur, I would have thought, well, at least God promised he would not destroy the whole world. But it doesn't mean we will not destroy some parts of the world, the warm or a people or a city. And I still like Rabbi Sachs' explanation of God's role in the Holocaust, for instance. God was there with the people, but people were free to build gas chambers or to die with dignity. And so human agency still existed. But if there is any meaning in God's destruction of the world, is that, watch out, guys, I can do it from now, but you're on your own now. So beware, be careful.
Yeah. And I also love when you said that his theology of of himself.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah.
Which also of us, to remind us we also have the capacity to destroy, and then to have compassion and coming off of the high holidays when we're looking back on our whole year of all the things that we might have done wrong, and the things here, it's like starting with the lessons, like, okay, step one, recognize, right now, not next Rosh Hashanah, now, that, those are the things we should look out for.
Beautiful. Right. Don't let it get to the storm, the flood.
Rather than looking for watery parallels in our own time, I find a closer parallel in the whole episode of the pandemic. Because of the initial feeling of helplessness, nobody knew where it was coming from or what it was going to do. And it really felt like the whole world was subject to a really destructive force that did not discriminate between the learned and the unlearned, and easily picture the survivors would be not the folks whom we would look to for leadership necessarily, the ones who were physically strong, whatever. And where is the rainbow in our time? Really, everyone placed their hopes on a vaccine, which may or may not have been the appropriate solution. In all probability, it was the way people came together to help each other and to help the people who were ill, and in all other sorts of ways, help families who were under stress. It was really remarkable. But the rainbow might have been God answering a request and inspiring the people who developed the vaccine, as well as those who really sacrificed themselves to care for the sick or to attend to their neighbors' needs, or whatever.
I totally agree with you. My interest and love of Jonah grew out of the pandemic because I felt like being sequestered on a teva was so relatable. I didn't have any animals, but I had 3 small children. That was enough. And then that fear of getting off of the boat felt very relatable to me after the pandemic. When is it safe to go out? When, as you said, we are not quite, we don't always know how to find the rainbow or to identify the rainbow. You know, I guess I would say, per the Ramban and per Nechama Leibowitz, in some ways, the rainbow is actually just this contract between God and the people. And so we might not always have one after a flood, right? Sometimes good things happen or bad things happen, but that contract, like it's a one and done. We don't get it again, right? You know, as she and the Ramban said, we often look for symbolism and we can't always find it because sometimes it's just what it is. But I agree. I think there are many rainbows. I like to look for them, just trying to be true to the text as well.
There are many floods as well. It's just that they don't involve water. So
Definitely.
God did not say he wouldn't try something else if we neglected it.
Hmm.
But I think he meant, or at least satisfy me, I think he meant that he won't destroy all of humankind again,
Yes,
with or
as
without a
Nelson
flood.
said, right?
Is
Certain
was
people,
that it?
certain groups. Yes, I think that's right.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I agree.
As far as the study sheets go, yes, I enjoy the challenge of actually reading Nechama Leibowitz's materials. I have the book and I've looked into it from time to time, but it does take patience to read through the questions and the source references. And so I welcome some guiding hand to
Okay.
help with that. And I'll just mention that a teacher whom I've studied with and admire a good deal is, I think, a former student of Nechama. At any rate, she uses the same approach, and that is Esther Schkopp, the
Mm,
retired dean of the Blitzstein Institute of Hebrew Theological College in Skokie.
mm,
And she provided us with assignments that were essentially the question part, you know,
mm,
like Nechama
Mm.
Leibowitz's question. She
mhm.
set it up like that.
Cool. Well, so perhaps next time, because we won't be, you know, going through her history as much, we'll do some of the questions. I'm going to post the link. This is one, there are a few different places that do it, but this is, I think, a pretty clear version of the Hebrew of the page, right? That's of the last pages of our piece here, right? So it's pages 88, 89, and 90. It's just written much more clearly, and it's in Hebrew. So it's in this book, she translates everything into English. Here, it's not translated into English. Some of them are translated into English on Sefaria, but not all of them, and this is not one of them. And as you can see, the X's for the She'ela Kasheh and She'ela Kasheh Biyoter, the even harder question, is down there at the bottom. So you are welcome to look through it. It does seem to build at least a little bit on her opening pages. And so perhaps we'll look at one of those next week and see if we can crack it a little bit. So come prepared to work on the text and answer the questions. I've heard that you can find the answers, so I'll see what I can do to find me her answers. Maybe Bobby has them written down from a shear one day.
I'll have to find out.
Delving into a world of like a woman who truly had chasidim, right? Not just talmidim, but chasidim, was fascinating to see all of the stuff that sort of swirls around in an effort to preserve her memory. One of the things I listened to was a woman named Aviva Rock who spoke about being the youngest talmidah of Nechama's because her mother worked at oh gosh, the yeshiva is escaping my head. The midrasha, it's where my sister went. I still can't. Gold, something gold. I'll think of it. No, thank you. My husband suggested something. Gosh, I'll think of it at some point. But anyway, her mother worked at the midrasha, and Chama Leibowitz would teach a class after Kabbalat Shabbat on Friday nights. And her mother dragged her as a 6-year-old and her brother as a 9-year-old every week. And she said that she really appreciated that her mother understood like the impact it would leave on her life, even though she didn't understand anything of the class. Just sitting in front of such a great scholar was very meaningful for her. And she is in her 50s, I think, now, right? And so there are fewer and fewer people who've had that direct impact with Nechama Leibowitz, but they're working very hard to preserve the memories of those times.
Yeah.
There are even some recordings and videos, but again, not of this one, but I'll see maybe I'll try to link it up better next time.
Have you met her, Yael?
No,
Oh.
I don't want to tell you how young I was in 1997. I'm about a Beaver Rocks age, I guess, actually.
Wow.
But Ed and I were in class with her at Hebrew University,
Wow,
Oh,
so we did learn with her.
that's
Wow.
really
Yes.
amazing.
And
Well, if you guys have any particular favorites, I'm happy to work on a Gilead that you guys like also. So you can let me know.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for coming, everybody. I hope to see you next week and that you have a wonderful week and a Shabbat Shalom. And I'll see you soon.
Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Bye-bye.
But,
Bye-bye.
thanks.